Edition of the Orangebloods Modcast. I'm Geoff Ketchum. That's Santa Anwar, Alex Dunlap, Jason Suchomel. We're talking Texas football on Christmas Eve, National Signing Day a week ago. We had lots to talk about a week ago when all of the dust settled from a very busy National Signing Day. It's been a little quieter this week, although we've got the Ryan Watts discussion to lead off with. We'll update all the coaching search stuff. We'll take your questions. Jump in the chat. The water is warm. Ask your questions. We'll be interactive. I guess, fellas, let's start with the news of the day, really the news of last night. Ohio State safety / cornerback / I guess do-it-all defensive back, because he could really help Texas in a lot of different areas. Ryan Watts commits to the Longhorns. Jason, not unexpected. I had mentally been counting Ryan Watts in the scholarship numbers for about a week, and I know that you were like, well, slow down, Baylor's out there. It's not official, but he becomes official last night. So let's just start off with a little Ryan Watts discussion and your initial thoughts on adding him to this. It's weird. It's not even necessarily a signing class anymore. It's like incoming numbers. I don't know that he's officially listed on a National Signing Day sheet or anything like that. But he has a chance to be one of the bigger impact players that the Longhorns have brought in so far from all of the incoming players.
Yeah, still a young player. He's played 2 years at Ohio State. I guess one of those could be the COVID year, so he still has quite a bit of eligibility left. I talked to Ryan about a week ago, and you're right, Ketch. He told me, Ryan, what I love about most of these transfer portal guys, even though he's only 2 years removed from being a recruit, it's night and day talking to these guys when they're transfers versus recruits. They don't play the games or whatever. And he was pretty forthcoming with me about a week ago when we talked and said, yeah, man, it was all Texas when I first entered the portal, but now Baylor's coming on strong. And he said Texas probably led back then, but he goes, man, it's pretty close to 50-50 because he had a relationship with Dave Aranda from when he was a high school recruit. Baylor's DB coach he knew. So anyways, it was about 50-50, but he kind of is like, yeah, probably Texas still has the lead, but I want to wait about a week. I hit him up yesterday and just said, hey, do you have a timeline? And he said, he hit me back yesterday. I think I sent y'all a message on Slack, and it was like, yeah, hey, basically 6 o'clock tonight I'm committing. And I was like, okay, Texas ? And he goes, yeah. Okay. Texas has talked to him. Terry Joseph and Sark's been involved. You're right. He brings some versatility to the defensive backfield catch. And who knows, man, they may move him around, plug and play different places depending on where they need him. But they have talked to him very specifically about playing the boundary corner position, which I thought was interesting because, again, I mean, I think there's going to be some moving parts in that secondary. They're going to have to see who fits where. But initially, they are bringing him in with the idea of playing boundary cornerback. A guy who played well at Ohio State. I think he was tied for the team lead with 2 interceptions this year at Ohio State. And anytime if you can even get on the field at a place like Ohio State, you're probably a pretty good player. He had a couple starts up there. So he's a guy that I think should come in and provide immediate help in the Texas secondary, maybe even possibly likely be a day one starter for Texas.
Alex, what's your thought on that? I wasn't quite sure. It feels like safeties where the most immediate help is needed. Obviously, a lot of these guys are versatile enough that they can play in multiple spots. We've even talked about Anthony Cook potentially being a guy that can slide over to safety. When you hear boundary corner for Ryan Watts, your brain goes off and thinks what?
Well, I think that Texas. I would think that with the 2 players coming back into Deshaun Jamison and Jahdae Barron, who really played well to end last season, as far as the starters at corner, it doesn't feel like it's in completely dire need right now, not as much as it is as safety, whereas, the only 2 guys on the roster right now, as we talked about last week, Jaron Thompson and J.D. Coffey as true safeties. Of course, I had to call them earlier in the week talking about how there's some nickel stuff that could get moved around. There are the 2 true safeties in this class, and then I keep on getting it. Is it Terrence Brooks? Because there was a Terrence Cooks.
Terrence Brooks is the incoming guy. Terrence Cooks is the outgoing guy.
and there's There's a Terrence Brooks that plays safety for the Texans as well. So that's how I guess I'll remember it. But I think Terrence Brooks, whenever you watch his film, he looks like he could play safety. There are just going to be some moving pieces. I saw a comment in the there's a lot of comments here in this. Okay, so this guy David Williams, he said if Deshaun Jameson doesn't return to the level of cornerback play he showed as a sophomore, Ryan Watson, Terrence Brooks might start at Texas in 2022. And I don't think that's completely out of the question. I think he's probably forgetting about Jahdae Barron. And whenever he brought that up, I just went and looked. I'm like, okay, Deshaun Jameson this last year, I mean, so his completion percentage when clearly targeted this year was 64.52%. I mean, was he that much worse last year? Deshaun Jameson, 61%.
Well, he gave up more big plays, certainly.
Completion percentage. And then as far as the coverage burns, he gave up 4 coverage burns in 2020. Deshaun Jameson in 2021 gave up 4 coverage burns. I don't know, man. It's like it doesn't seem like he was quite as good for sure. There were probably some ancillary things outside of just the completion percentage and the coverage burns allowed. I agree that, you know, Brooks looks like a dude who could come in and start. Watts looks like a guy who could come in and start. You look at the moving pieces and you say, start where? Especially with Brooks, because, man, like the more and more I think about it, the more and more I think that if Anthony Cook could make a move to safety, I think that Brooks would come in and immediately slide in and look like the best nickel player Texas has. Because if you think about it, behind Anthony Cook was Jaron Thompson, who's going to have to start at safety. And then there was Marquez Caldwell, who's gone. Like there's nobody in the pipe right now that looks like a legit corner. I feel like he could come in as a true freshman and really make waves. And so I think it's not so much about whether these guys are good and whether they can come in and compete and stuff. It's like where they're going to compete and how these pieces are going to get moved around in the secondary coming into 2022.
Anwar, why are you the only guy in the Christmas spirit today?
I don't know. I think Alex is in his spirit because he's wearing all black. So that's, all you guys are wearing all black, which is kind of crazy.
I was going to wear my Homer Simpson Christmas beer sweater, but it's like 80 degrees outside, man. How do you get
yeah, I know.
80-something degrees.
Jason, I'm kind of curious, though, before I get into my comments. You know, he seemed to be productive at Ohio State. What was his? Did we know the reason why he entered the transfer portal?
You know, when he and I talked last week, Anwar, he just mentioned getting closer to home. We didn't go into a lot of detail. I'm supposed to hopefully talk to him today, so I'll get a little bit more background. But he just kind of casually mentioned that to me. I said, "Are there any other schools involved?" And he mentioned a couple of it. He goes, "But it's pretty much Baylor or Texas, you know, so I can get closer to home." So I think that was a big part of it.
And that could have many layers to it. So we'll just let that one be. That you've answered that question. I mean, like this defense wasn't good last year, like overall. So there's not a single thing that you can tell me that they can't upgrade on defense. I mean, like, but outside, I mean, I can't think of outside of the catch, DeMarvion, Overshown. Like, how many people will you stand on the table for going into the 2022 season saying, like, that's my guy? I mean, maybe say Keandre,
Byron Murphy.
Would you say
Byron Murphy, of course, right?
Yeah,
Byron
sure,
Murphy,
sure.
Yeah.
We won't, no matter what, we won't need 2 hands to do the count, right? I think we can agree to that. Yeah. No matter who we go with, we'll probably stop at one hand. So, you know, I kind of like that. You know, the more bodies you can stack on a defense that gave up, you know, close to 60 points to Kansas at home, that couldn't, you know, stop the floodgates versus an Oklahoma State. I mean, the more of those guys that you can bring in that can actually go and make tackles. I like that he's long and lean, and being at 6'3" is kind of, you know, really helpful. And a part of me too, Ketch, wonders, you know, we didn't see it maybe in signing day itself, but we kind of wondered, okay, well, what kind of impact could Quinn Ewers potentially have as a guy that's come here? You know, again, as Jason noted in his story, it's the second Ohio State guy, but you've got to imagine that these young players know each other, have a relationship with each other. You've got to imagine there's been conversations between Quinn and this young man. So you've got to figure like there has to be some sort of recruiting impact that has happened. And maybe this ends up being the first one that we've seen so far, or first one that we can think of. But I got to imagine Quinn has some sort of impact in there in that kind of decision-making process.
It's interesting. We've had a lot of questions about the wide receiver position. You know, there's a lot. there's a lot of little newsy things that we'll talk about. One of the things that I wanted to,
we'll just do a hat at you.
Hold on, I'm going to be in the spirit too.
Here we go.
It doesn't fit real good, but I'm in.
There you go.
Now it's Anwar and I both.
Yes.
No, I feel like the Grinch, man. I didn't know.
Facial hair, and I'm set. I went to Chick-fil-A yesterday, and I looked in my rearview mirror, and a fully clothed Santa Claus was behind me. And I wanted to take a picture through the rearview mirror, and I didn't do it. But yeah, I saw Santa. Kids, if you're watching, Santa's okay. He was eating Chick-fil-A yesterday, getting ready for his rounds. So all good on the Santa front. He was in the Houston area yesterday in line.
You should have done the thing where you paid for the guy behind you. You would have brought you some good karma on Christmas.
I did not pay it forward, Alex. all I could think about was trying to get my phone. I didn't want to be creeper guy, though, and taking a photo of my rearview mirror with Santa Claus in the background. I thought, that's a little too – do I really need, favorites and retweets?
And again, if he's dressed up like that, I think he understands that he's okay with the attention.
Yeah, exactly.
He wasn't like a guy who just so happened to look like Santa and it was at HEB.
Correct.
He clearly wants the Santa attention.
He was not dressing wherever he was dressed to impress in the very moment that he was there. I'm writing a thing on the scholarship deal right now, and I think it's interesting to talk about this. Pete tells me to pay it forward. Pete, I will. It won't help out Santa Claus, but because I stiffed Santa at Chick-fil-A yesterday.
That Easter Bunny's getting paid.
Exactly. The Easter Bunny will get the hookup. Sarkisian mentioned last week, and it's funny because Anwar and I have already had a conversation about this morning. We're seeking clarification, but last week he mentioned that they were going to try to get 35 or 36 incoming players. I don't completely understand the math because I've run it by the NCAA. I've double checked. I've checked my list twice and 3 times like a good prospective Santa Claus, and the numbers that I still have would be the 32, the 25 plus the 7 transfers that the NCAA is allowing you to replace. And then they've got 1 holdover scholarship. So I've got them at 33. I double checked. The NCAA says there's no such thing as graduate seniors not counting against the scholarship limit. I don't know how that became a thing or a talking point. I don't know who said it first, but according to the NCAA, that's not in place. So it's not like they can take 33 and then add a couple of grad seniors and those guys wouldn't count against the signing class. So I've got Texas with 5 available scholarships. One of those is absolutely reserved for Devon Campbell or Devon Campbell, whichever the case may be. So that would leave 4. So as we're getting all of these questions about wide receivers in the portal and edge rushers in the portal and offensive line, this is still a team, Anwar, that needs a lot of help if they're to try to get to whatever the record would be with such a young team. Where do they need? And I'm going to ask everybody this question. If the numbers are as tight as I think they are with respect to Steve Sarkisian's numbers, and look, maybe there actually will be 2 or 3 extra spots, but we know that they can take 33. Where would you put your emphasis right now?
It's funny because I think I saw a comment down there by Hollis Burks that had said, he said, am I wrong thinking that linebacker is still a position of need? Hollis is not wrong because you would still say that is a position, of need, at least, get upgraded. And Ketch, they took 16 last year. And so you're kind of like, man, you're going to go do that again? Well, probably. You probably got to hit on it until you get it right at this point, So, I would say, linebacker would definitely be something that, you would see. And I would still say, edge rusher, it's still kind of a position, for me. I like, a lot of the incoming freshmen that they, but I don't know what kind of impact those guys can have right away. So finding someone who could be an established edge rusher that's in the portal, those would kind of be like my top two.
Alex, what about you?
Positions of need in the portal.
I mean, if there are 4 spots left, 4. Let's just say Campbell ends up being in this class, so there's 4 left. If you can only add 4 through the transfer portal and or still high school, and I'm kind of sour on the idea of high school recruits unless it's Harold Perkins or somebody of that ilk. I think somebody that can come in and help this roster immediately is of greater importance. What would you stress?
Well, I mean, it's interesting with the guy that brought up linebackers, because as far as pure inside linebackers, and this is without even the discussion that probably we won't have here, but the discussion that I've sort of had with people on the side about would it be that big a deal to maybe just see how DeMarvion Overshown would look over at that buck end as a pass rusher? I mean, I'm starting to think that could look good. But so the inside guys at linebacker, you have DeMarvion. I think Brockermeyer's coming back, right?
Yep.
Devin Richardson will be back. Jalen Ford will be back.
Here are your linebackers, Alex.
David Binda. Okay.
You've got Overshown, Brockermeyer, Bush, Ogofu, Richardson, Ford, Binda, Jaden Hullaby, Maurice Blackwell. And then you've got Derek Brown and Travell Johnson coming in.
So the guys that you mentioned, Ovi doesn't play inside linebacker. Jet Bush doesn't play inside linebacker. And Maurice Blackwell is like playing this, he played safety in the Rice game whenever he got into garbage time in the Rice game. But in the Kansas game and whatever the second to last game was, they were using him as a coverage and third down linebacker. So he has a specialized role. Like I said, Ovi plays at the Sam linebacker spot. Jet Bush plays at the buck end. So we're talking about DeMarvion Overshown, Luke Brockermeyer, Devin Richardson, Jalen Ford, David Binda, and I don't know about Hullaby. I think maybe you could use another linebacker, because at this point, especially if it's a linebacker with versatility to play in an overhang capacity, like at that Sam, because the only true Sam you have right now is Ovi. You lost Ben Davis, who kind of was like a 30% snap participant towards the end of last year. So I think maybe I would go linebacker with one of those, certainly safety. I mean, with safety for sure. I think that offensive line is fine. I know that a lot of these people say, like, look, you can't just be depending on all these freshmen. But to me, it's like, I think that there are a few of these freshmen. Devon Campbell, you can depend on immediately. Kelvin Banks, you can depend on immediately. I even think Cam Williams, you can depend on pretty close to immediately, while everybody else just thinks he's a complete project. Wide receiver, I think that just definitely needs a look. There was Brennan Thompson, then they got Savion Red. Was that the only 2 that they got?
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, you get O'Meary back, of course. You get Worthy back, Whittington. But behind those guys, I mean, Kelvonte Dixon showed some things. Marcus Washington will be back on the roster. Trying to think of who else is even coming back. Casey Kane and stuff. So the guys from last year. Alexis. I think wide receiver maybe. You can add an impact player like that. So what is that? 3 safety, wide receiver, linebacker, and then maybe another safety or just another.
You got no edge rusher. He's gonna roll out what they have.
No, but here's the thing, Ketch. Didn't we talk about this before? That the edge rush, I don't think that edge rushers grow on trees. I'm not sure you can find one they tried to find one in the portal with Ray Thornton, and he was worse than probably what they even had on. Would Prince Dorba have been that much worse than Ray Thornton this year?
Well, the edge rusher that they lost was the kid that went to Utah State and had a really good year.
Byron Vaughns.
Yeah, Vaughns ends up being a really good college player this year and playing that exact position for Utah State, and ended up being a really good player for them.
And dude, I mean, this guy, I could be crazy, but I think number 90 for Wesley, what's it, Burke? I think number 90 for Wesley could come in and make an immediate impact. But look, man, I think that edge rusher, if there's one in there that's actually good, of course you're going to want to get him. I'm very skeptical that at this point in the transfer portal, there's going to be a good, productive edge rusher that Texas is going to be.
Well, you know why?
Because they don't grow on trees.
Sucked last year. Texas didn't Texas looked at the transfer portal and they were like, oh, we'll just take a guy from Alabama and take a guy from LSU, and those guys will be better than what Texas has, but they weren't good players. And like, I feel like if there had been a different experience last year with work that Texas would have done in the portal, they're off to a look, Ewers and Watts are like really good additions through the portal. The question is fair. Would there be pass rush help there? I don't know. But I can't look at what Texas did a year ago and say, well, there are no good pass rushers available because they lazily took Ray Thornton and Ben Davis and, a couple of other guys that just weren't – I think they misread the room. I think they thought another program's trash would be Texas's treasure, and it just turned out that they just moved over some non-working parts. So you may be right, Alex. Like, it may be that good pass rushers don't enter the portal. They just stay at the schools that they're at. But God, you got to try, because they were so bad. Like, I don't know what the answer is.
Well, I don't either. But now that I kind of look at it, and I just wonder, as far as the freshmen coming in, are there any of those guys that you think, like, if you just look at them, because there's Tapp, how much does he weigh? What is James? I remember thinking he'd be a great edge rush prospect.
About 240. I mean, yeah.
Finkley's a guy that I think they could tinker with there.
Isn't he a little bit more of an inside kind of prospect, though? I remember thinking.
I mean, it's all hands on deck for me. I would try him.
Right, and then Swanson, the Swanson kid, Zach Swanson. He's a little bigger than I thought. He looks like more of a strong side defensive end.
He's probably going to be an interior guy in time too. So.
As usual, man, we'll have to see how these guys look sort of once they come in. But I think that Ethan Burke. I seem to remember when I was Derek Brown. Was he 6'2"? There are a few of these guys that look like they can maybe come in, but it'll just I think it'll take getting our eyeballs on them. The coaches getting their eyeballs on them and seeing sort of how they fit in. But I just look, if clearly if there's an edge rusher that you like and has been productive or at least looks like he's got some upside in the transfer portal, of course it's like besides safety, it's the biggest need on it could be the biggest need on defense, because
we haven't said Jatavian Sanders' name, Alex. It's the elephant in the room, right?
Well, yeah, but we all realize though with Jared Wiley leaving, it's like I think that Jatavian Sanders is probably going to stay at tight end now. Don't you guys think? It feels like that was felt sort of telling. I don't know. I mean, Ketch, you and I both really liked what we saw out of the brief glimpses of Juan Davis this year. I think that guy will be good. But I think that, probably Jatavian, Jeff Banks will have more ammo to keep him in his room, I think, now that Jared Wiley's left, because that Jeff Banks is holding on. Just has an iron grip on that dude. He says, you're not taking him to defense. So I don't know.
He's still got to beat out Gunnar Helm as well, too, though, in that mix.
And you know what? Gunnar Helm could totally outsnap Jatavian this year, because Gunnar Helm is the one was the one young tight end who they trusted as an inline tight end. He played inline for like 75% of his snaps, whereas the other young tight ends and Juan Davis and Jatavian Sanders played either at H-back or split out. They love Gunnar Helm as an inline guy, so they kind of see him more as the future Cade Brewer type, which clearly gets a whole ton of snaps.
Jason, I'm curious, is there any high school guys that you think with these numbers that are available, it feels like most of the remaining targets are unlikely, but is there anybody that that they're in on that off the top of our heads we haven't been accounting for in these? We counted Campbell. Who else?
Yeah, you got guys like Amari Abor and Ernest Green, guys I think that are probably more unlikely. So I know that they're holding spots for them. Campbell, you're going to hold a spot for. I still think they need to get a receiver from the portal and maybe a receiver from the high school ranks. Maybe these coaches know something we don't. Maybe they know that Troy O'Mary is going to come back and be healthy and be fantastic and next year, and then maybe that impacts things. But, they're still flirting with some wide receivers in the 2022 class. I still think in the portal they could go that direction. And maybe I'm the minority. I still think they need at least one veteran offensive lineman from the portal. But Catch what you said. They can't do what they did last year. Just take a guy like, oh, wait a second. He's from Alabama. He's got to be good, right? Yeah, he never played at Alabama. But hey, sitting on the bench at Alabama, he's going to be, they've got to find guys that I think are productive that are looking for a bigger stage. I've said that for weeks. I still think they need – this offensive line class is incredible. If you add DJ Campbell to it, it's even better. But do you want to throw 2-3 true freshmen to the mix, to the Wolves? I mean, Sark didn't seem too concerned about it in the signing day press conference, but I still think you would be better off at least having the security of having one veteran player that you're bringing in from the portal. So I think wide receiver, offensive line to me are important. Do you want to get an edge rusher? Of course, but Alex keeps saying it, and I agree with him. Those guys don't grow on trees. Yeah. If there's a good edge rusher out there, he's probably A, playing for his team and not leaving, B, more likely to be getting ready for the NFL draft than he is to hit the transfer portal. Those guys are tough to come by. So I think you can find help at offensive line, maybe at receiver, maybe at linebacker. But, man, you read that list of linebackers from last year, and it's like, how many guys can you keep throwing at this? And it's just like, they're just all kind of average to slightly above average. I don't know, man. The numbers are going to be really tight, but it's a good problem to have when you've recruited so well along the offensive line. But I still think they need to bring in a transfer from the offensive line as well.
And Jason, to your point, I think Sarkisian and the staff learned a lesson that Herman and even Charlie had to learn, which was just because you're in the Big 12, don't think it's going to be easy. I mean, I think it's easy to look up on the outside and be like, they're bringing anybody and they'll be fine against Oklahoma State or Baylor or Iowa State. This is easy. And then you realize, like, holy crap, these programs actually have guys who are developed, who have been in the system for a while, and they may not be highly regarded, but there's some damn good players on the other side. And then to the point where you see, other teams that just rise up. And so I think now going forward, they understand, like, it's not just about grabbing anybody and then saying, like, he may have sat on the bench, at Bama for 5 years or whatever, but he'll be fine here in Texas. To realize, like, nah, better get some guys who are real, bona fide studs with some, or at least very, very high upside.
Can I just say something to this guy, Ronnie Jones? This quote: "This is Burke at a DE. He's good. He wanted to get my son at San Marcos High School. My son has way with his son is 6'4", 320 pounds." But Burke had lots of success. I imagine he could play a big role. Ronnie Jones, how much money are you having to spend for Christmas dinner? So you got a 6'4", 320-pound human living in your same home. My goodness, I can't imagine.
That kid gets the first piece of chicken, man.
I'm sure.
In the last.
Jones is having to be hands off until that animal gets done, man. The other thing I was going to say is, these people keep saying in the chat, people are talking about, you got to protect. David Castillo says you got to protect Ewers. Throwing these young offensive linemen to the Wolves could be costly. You can't just throw them to the Wolves. I'm just like, what do you think what do you think they would be doing if they put in, any of the offensive linemen that Texas currently has on their roster, or most of these guys who are in the transfer portal that aren't the hits that Texas has had? And Texas has had exactly 2 hits out of the transfer portal or out of the JUCO market since I've been doing this, in Parker Braun and Calvin Anderson. It's like 2. Out of all the years, like I've been doing this.
They haven't had a lot of misses either. I mean, it's not like they brought in 10. I'm just thinking of the Brandon Hodgeses. I'm thinking of the Willie Tylers. I'm thinking of those guys don't count. They're JUCO guys.
Well, all right. Maybe but I mean, Donald Hawkins was a JUCO guy. So
yeah, Parker Braun were graduate transfers. Those were before the portal too. Those guys were both graduate transfers. So they were JUCOs, but the transfer portal wasn't around back then. So
I don't think that people realize how good Devon Campbell is, how good Kelvin Banks. You're not throwing these dudes to the Wolves. You're throwing the defensive players that go up against these guys to the Wolves. Like, these are good players who can come in and play for 3 years and get the hell out of here. Like, it's not that kind.
Those guys, they may make some mistakes, but their ceiling is so high versus these other guys you're going to trot out there are going to make the same mistakes, and what their ceiling is. I mean, if they're running even, throw the young, if they're even close to even at any position, I always say, throw the young guys out there, man, where, at least they have some potential to get a lot better versus, where they're kind of tapped out and still pretty average players. I'd rather have a pretty average true freshman that's maybe taken some lumps, knowing that he has a ton of potential 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road, than a fourth-year senior that's pretty average, and he's never going to be much more than pretty average.
And we've seen, like, and then just, these last few years, I mean, obviously Connor Williams is tough to, project everybody to be him. But I mean, dude, he didn't come in with half the pedigree of these guys. He came in, he was really, really good as a freshman. And there have been freshmen who have come in and played on the offensive line that have been serviceable. I mean, Shackelford played every year that he was here. He wasn't terrific as a freshman, but he was serviceable enough. He wasn't the reason that line was bad. Patrick Vahe wasn't the reason the line was bad when he was a freshman. Derek Kerstetter wasn't the reason. When Sam Cosby got in as a freshman, he was good. Jake Majors played 3 games as a freshman. Andre Carrick was better as a freshman than he was as a sophomore. So, I mean, I think these guys I think that I wouldn't be as worried. To me, this offensive line group is good news. If, like Jason says, if they come in close, I don't think you're throwing them to the Wolves at all. I think the offensive line will look good compared to what it's looked like in the recent past. And I've studied every snap that every offensive lineman at Texas has taken for the last 8 years.
Shout out to my dude Paul, as he said, rip the Band-Aid off. Right, Paul?
Anwar, I think the elephant in the room is that this is because someone mentioned like quarterback, and there's a world out there where we don't know what Hudson Card is going to do. But if Hudson Card were to enter the portal and leave, suddenly you're a quarterback room with 2 true freshmen and Charles Wright. And now, can you go out and find a quarterback? You can. The one thing that I noticed about last year's portal is the quarterback position turned into a place where there weren't any stars, like starting level players that were left behind, but there were players who had started games at places that ended up not finding homes where they were starting quarterbacks. The issue might be, if we're talking about 4 slots being available and where do you help this team, do you have enough room to go get a quarterback and leave offensive line, wide receiver, linebacker, whatever the case may be? This is going to be a program that's not going to fix all of its problems this year. That it feels like the elephant in the room here is that if we get to August and people are talking about winning a conference championship before the season, without having seen any of these newcomers on the field, it feels like we'll be really ahead of ourselves because it's still a program and a team that didn't go to a bowl game and is still trying to fix a lot of places.
Well, Ketch, I'll just say this. If Hudson Card leaves, I mean, for the quarterback room is screwed, right? Because you're all chips in on Quinn at that point.
I hadn't even thought about that, Ketch, whenever you said it, and it sent a shiver down my spine to think about it.
Sorry about that on Christmas Eve.
Yeah. I mean, no, they're screwed because there's nothing. There's no disrespect to like a Ben Ballard, but you would have essentially a walk-on quarterback who was there, and then you'd have Charles Wright, who's clearly, he was a 4th-string guy last year. Wouldn't travel, which is very rare. You see a scholarship guy. That's a scholarship quarterback that should be the 3rd-string guy that doesn't travel with the team. So at that point, you're really talking about it's all Quinn or nothing at that point. And so, like, how do you find someone that of quality that's going to come here and just say, "I'll be the backup"? I mean, that the people who would be the backup would be Ben Ballard or Charles Wright. Like, that would be the guys that, if you got in a portal, would probably be the equivalent. You're not going to find elite starting talent, at that point. So they, I don't know how you keep Hudson here. But if there ever was a retention thing that needs to happen, okay, I feel that's the boy right there. I feel Ketch was just asking about you one of the last broadcasts.
That's why I brought that up. If Alfio Randall VC has a comment that strong, I'm going to put it up on the board.
Yeah, that should do right there. There's and I take it back. I mean, you still have Malik that's there as well. So I apologize. That's somewhat disrespectful.
Yeah, hey, someone mentioned he'd take Malik over Hudson, K-Drag. I mean, losing Hudson Card would be a big hit to the depth of that position, but let's say Quinn's not the guy, or Quinn gets hurt or something. Is Hudson Card going to be the guy based on what we saw last year? That's going to.
Nah, you're right, Jason.
I mean, really. I mean, listen, I love Hudson Card, and I've covered him as a recruit, and I hate to bash on the kid, but what I saw from him last year, I'd almost rather throw Malik Murphy out there and see what he's capable of.
What we've done to Hudson Card
be much worse,
such
Anwar.
an
but here's why I would defend Hudson a little bit on that. In the West Virginia game, he actually played better. I mean, he looked like he had grown. He played with more confidence, I thought, in that game, and I thought he looked pretty good up until the point that he got hurt. So I saw growth, I saw progress from him. So I would say that, and that the thing is, I have to give him a little bit of a pass here. Is, I mean, Alex has graded out this offensive line. They weren't great last year at any point. And again, I made this point in one of the things that Ketch and I did previously. I can't knock a guy too much for flinching where he continually gets slapped. Like, that's what happened with Hudson. He kept getting slapped and slapped and slapped, and you're like, well, don't flinch. And at some point, it's like, okay, man, like you can't. It's hard to tell a guy don't flinch when he's continually getting slapped. It's kind of
he'll have a spring and summer to develop. Sark maybe can develop him, but I'm just saying it wouldn't be good if Hudson Card leaves, but I can't definitively say that, hey, Texas is screwed if he is, because I don't know based on what we saw last year. I don't know that Hudson's any better than Malik. He may be, he may not be. I don't know, but I don't know that it impacts things too dramatically based on what we saw, what these guys saw from Hudson Card last year.
Well, we decided that a young player who in his first season, right? So we've all decided that Hudson Card at Texas is done. I mean, it feels like he's cooked. This conversation about Hudson Card is like, well, if he leaves, the depth is ripped apart. That's all he is to Texas right now, though, is a little bit of depth. Nobody in the program has confidence in Hudson Card. He's literally Tyrone Swoops in 2015. You saw Tyrone Swoops in 2014. It was like anybody but that guy as the starting quarterback. And the reality is Hudson was really young, really ill-prepared for the moment last year when called upon. And then everybody's decided that, well, then he should be written off. And there's no ability for him to grow and mature and develop and to still turn into the guy that I certainly think he can be. He's in a really weird spot because I don't know how Hudson Card develops trust. Because if we do a practice report in August that says that Hudson Card looks great in practice and he's the best looking quarterback in practice, everybody's going to roll their eyes and say, that's what you got.
They're going to do more than roll their eyes. They're going to riot on the boards, too.
No, exactly. And so, but we've decided that a kid that hasn't even played his sophomore season, let alone his junior and senior seasons at the quarterback positions. Look, Peyton Manning was pretty awful as a freshman at Tennessee. He had more interceptions than touchdowns. And yet, guys grow up. And Hudson's not going to get that benefit of the doubt at Texas. But it's amazing to me. We did this thing on, Anwar and I did this video with Ari I can't even remember what the hell it was. Anwar and I did a video on Tuesday. What's happened to Hudson Card's amazing because is there another player at any other position that we've completely written off based on how terrible they were this season or any season? We've done this thing with Hudson Card because he's a quarterback where we've just determined, God, he sucked against Arkansas. He lost his job. There's no coming back. But I feel like if he'd committed a crime and been suspended for the team or just had a bad game at running back or receiver, like that stuff gets dismissed so much more easily. And, in my opinion, there's no way Hudson Card comes back this year because I just don't know how he sits at home with his parents and or advisors and feels like there's a path for him at Texas with the arrival of Ewers.
Let's just Ketch. I'll just say one thing, and then whoever else wants to talk. I mean, just with Hudson, he looked like such a good quarterback in these 7-on-7s and these camps and all this stuff. You get there and you just, oh my God, you just can't believe it, right? But then he gets in the games and you just see it's like it was beyond frustrating. It was beyond frustrating to see how he just couldn't process anything that was going on. And he didn't have any sense of timing in the pocket. He didn't have any sense of where pressure was coming from. He just didn't seem to have it in actual games. And they say, man, with these quarterbacks, there's a lot that you could teach them. And there's certain things that if you don't see them early on, it's like, if they're going to bite his dogs, they're going to bite his pups with some of this stuff. And some of that stuff is just kind of trusting your coaching, trusting your ability to throw these wide receivers open, throwing the ball to spots where the receiver might not be, that anticipation, right? That's something that you can see early on with these guys. Hudson didn't show any of it. Like
Chris Sims was terrible at times in 2001.
Right, but yeah.
And Texas fans would have said, coming out of the Big 12 championship game in 2001, I don't ever want to see Chris Sims play quarterback at Texas again. He cost Texas a chance at a national championship game. He cost Texas a Big 12 championship. And then by the time we get to 2002, by the end of it, he was sensational and playing his best football. And it emerges as an NFL starting quarterback that I think, Anwar, did you cover any of the Chris Sims years?
Oh, yeah. I was there when he almost died.
Yeah. So, young quarterbacks sometimes are terrible. Vince Young.
I understand that, Ketch.
Vince Young couldn't complete a pass when he was at the same exact stage of Hudson Card's career.
Vince was the opposite of hold on.
But see, we're talking about different ways of
Hudson Card.
Okay.
Ketch,
What's that?
Vince was a terrible practice player.
Oh, I know.
When the lights came on, he was great. Hudson's a really good practice player. When the lights come on, he seems to get flustered. But
he's so young. I'm just saying, we've judged this guy on the second game of his career as a redshirt freshman on the road when nobody played well that day. And it's just, I'm not trying to say Hudson Card should be the starting quarterback.
You remember Kansas comes in and throws a few passes and throws a pick. It wasn't just the Arkansas game. I mean, he just looked rattled anytime he got on the field. I mean, I'm with Alex.
The week before against Louisiana, a team that went 11-1, he put up the best opening day performance that any quarterback has ever had at
Texas Tech. We know what happened against two terrible defenses, but anytime he faced a defense with any kind of –
well, it didn't happen very often.
It happened enough.
What games are you talking about?
Arkansas seemed to break him a little bit. I mean,
it did.
But what QBR against Kansas, he had a QBR of 2.5. I mean, West Virginia, he played a little better. Almar's right, but I mean, he's still just. I'm with Alex. He looks rattled to me. Sometimes guys can either process things quickly, and that's what I love about Quinn Ewers as much as anything else. I've said he just sees things and he processes things so quickly. Hudson doesn't seem to have that aspect. He just seems to get rattled out there.
Because he's a young quarterback. I mean, look at all the rookie quarterbacks in the NFL.
But Ketchum,
he's still going to be a young quarterback next year.
And here's the point: it's like a young quarterback can be bad and be terrible and just like really screw up games, but at least show you at some point during those games they have the requisite ability to be able to have the anticipation that they need, that they can grow in, and they can, that they can fix these other things, right? It's like you can be bad for different reasons, right? I think if you're bad for the reasons that Vince was, it's different from you were bad for the reasons that Hudson Card was. So that's that's my.
I'm just saying, there's no other player in the program that anybody's giving up on based on the second game of their redshirt freshman season. That it's a very unique thing that we're at with regards to Hudson Card, and I don't think there's been a player in the history of the program that his career path right now, we've gone from 12 months ago saying he's the future of the program to 7 quarters of football basically giving up on him forever. I don't know how smart that is, but I think it is what it is. Let's change directions, though, because I want us to talk about –
let me just add that to it. I would say that Casey Thompson probably would have a stronger argument than Hudson would. I mean, Hudson's a little bit of an older guy, but – you could say, hey, man, I led the Big 12 in touchdown passes thrown, and you still tried to replace me with the heir apparent, into which Casey, they're like, all right, we're good on this one. So, there was something from both quarterbacks that, I think Sarkisian was pretty plain in towards the end of the year that he wanted better, production out of that. And clearly he feels like Quinn could be that guy.
It'll be interesting to see what happens when Hudson Card transfers. What then happens to his career afterwards? That's a Modcast for another show. I want to talk about the coaching changes, because I think Tashard Choice is a really interesting addition to this coaching staff. Stan Drayton, one of the better running backs coaches in the country, so much so that he's now a head coach. Those opportunities don't grow on trees, and it says a lot about the respect around the country that people have with him, that he's a non-coordinator that was getting looks, and now he's at Temple. You've got Tashard Choice coming in from Georgia Tech, and we've got a wide receiving coaching position open. Jason, let's start with Tashard Choice. Everybody, I think, that's a big football fan, like I'm a Cowboys fan, so obviously I remember him as a player, but he really quietly had built up quite a name for himself at Georgia Tech as one of the – I remember last year when the staff was being hired, he was a guy that I thought should have been in the running backs coaching conversation because that reputation was building up. You know, I don't know that you can say he's better than Stan Drayton because of how long Stan has done it, but Tashard Choice looks like a guy who's on the rise in this industry. I think he's going to do a really good job for Texas.
I think it's a terrific hire. When I first heard Saturday morning, Tashard Choice, Texas, it took me a second to register it, and I was like, wait, Tashard Choice, the Cowboys did? I didn't even know he was at Georgia Tech, if I'm being honest. But in talking, and I'll have some of this in the war room tonight, but in talking to people at Georgia Tech, they say, hey, was the best recruiter on their staff, really developed that running back room through terrific recruiting, but also was able to develop they feel comfortable at Georgia Tech. They're 4 deep at running back because he's able to develop these guys as players. Players relate to him. He's incredibly personable. He's young. I talked to a couple of recruits about him. They're like, just the energy he brings. They said, I don't care if you're talking to him on the phone or in person. He just brings so much energy. And this is why Tashard Choice, I think, is a great recruiter. There's a running back that he had committed at Georgia Tech, and I talked to the kid, Javen Simpkins. Javen is his name. Javen Simpkins. Well, Javen Simpkins decommitted whenever Tashard Choice left for USC about, a week and a half ago or something. Tashard Choice gets a job at Texas. He's at a memorial, like a funeral I think it was in Atlanta, Georgia, but he took the time, like he goes, hey dude, he calls Javen Simpkins, hey, I'm at this memorial in Atlanta, but I just want you to hear from me. I'm taking the Texas job. And Javen Simpkins is like, dude, that's why I love Tashard Choice, because he treats you like family and makes you feel important. Even when he's in transition, and during that transition, he's in another state at a memorial, he took the time to think of me and say, hey, I want you to hear it from me. I'm going to Texas. So early returns, very early returns. I'm not even sure if Tashard Choice is in Austin yet, to be honest. But, everybody that I have talked to about Tashard Choice, everyone thinks it's a home run hire. I think it's exactly what Texas needed. We talked about it last week. I have a ton of respect for Stan Drayton as a person, as a coach. I do think Texas could have been elevated their recruiting position, or recruiting status at that running backs coach position. And I think they've done that with Tashard Choice. Stan Drayton brought in some good talent. I mean, the Texas backfield is pretty well stocked, but, Bijan kind of weirdly fell into his lap. I mean, a sign from God led Bijan Robinson to Texas as much as anything. Jonathan Brooks was never going anywhere but Texas. I know we talked about Ingram. I mean, he was never going anywhere. Keontae Ingram never going anywhere but Texas. But bottom line is, I think it's a tremendous hire. I think Tashard Choice can coach him up based on what I've been told, and I think he can recruit. I mean, I think he's going to be one of the better recruiters on the staff once he gets settled in.
Anybody else with any Tashard Choice thoughts?
My only thought is like what Jason said. I mean, you got to give Drayton credit for Bijan and some of these running backs that he's brought in, but I think that it's kind of like an adage that people talk about in recruiting, that your running backs, running backs coach is probably the coach that you need least on the team, right? As far as from an on-field perspective, there's not a lot that, there's not a lot that an offensive line coach is going to bring just from their, from what they teach these guys on field and stuff, rather than just kind of being a leader of that room, making sure they get through their drills, instilling the different techniques in them and stuff. But you want that guy to be a recruiter, not just for the running backs, but just like you want to be a badass recruiter for for all the positions, right? And that's what a lot of schools use their running backs coach for. It's why you always see these these kind of guys that are like directors of personnel or something like that have envision futures where they want to be coaches, right? It feels like a lot of those guys get elevated to running back coach positions at these schools because those guys can sometimes be the real rainmakers. So I think with Tashard Choice, if he's good on the field, if he's 80% on the field of what Stan Drayton was, and he can come in and be a better recruiter, I mean, it might be an upgrade as far as an overall addition to the Texas staff.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things too. I think what Jason has said is kind of the things I've heard about Tashard Choice as a person. I think that's important too because that's the same quality attributes that Stan Drayton had. Just being known as a good person, good human being, a very likable. Whether NFL or college, never heard anybody say anything negative who's associated with him about Stan Drayton. And so having that in the room, I think will be a good thing for those guys who are in there. Having a guy who's played the position always helps, right? Because everyone's trying to get there. So this guy is not telling you what he thinks he knows or studied. He's telling you exactly what you need to do, and guys will listen to that. And then to your other point, being able to, from a recruiting standpoint, Tashard Choice, maybe it helps a little bit with like a guy like a Ruben Owens, right? Who heard the pitch before from Stan and the staff and kind of was like, I'm not quite sure this is what I want to do, even though Ruben continues to hang around because I think Ruben just enjoys the recruitment process more than the majority of young guys out there. But maybe hearing a different pitch from Tashard maybe sparks a little bit something different, within Ruben. So I think overall it ends up probably being a good hire. The one thing you don't want to do is take a step backwards. And it doesn't seem to be like that. This is a step backwards at all. It will be, I think, at worst equal, which would be good enough. If it ends up being an upgrade, then it ends up being a kind of a home run hire for Sarkisian in Texas.
Hey, Anwar, real quick. You and I have talked in past modcasts about Stan Drayton and just character building and those things that we really liked about Stan Drayton, right? I talked to a Georgia Tech source about Tashard. They said he was almost like their team chaplain. Like he was the guy that players would go talk to when they're having problems or just needed to bend someone's ear. So sounds like he has a lot of those same qualities, and we'll get to know Tashard a lot better, but sounds like he brings a lot of that to the table as well as his recruiting and coaching ability too. So.
Sounds like we all need to make Tashard Choice a friend. I could use a Tashard Choice in my life, it sounds like. Anwar, another guy we're getting asked a ton about in the chat, Brennan Marion, the wide receivers coach from Pittsburgh. I think what's really interesting about that dude is that name popped up about a week ago when you and I first, hey, there's some scuttlebutt. When we had heard that it took a few days for the Coleman thing to kind of just materialize from when we first heard that he was going to be out. This guy's name has been mentioned from the very beginning. And so far, there really haven't been a lot of other guys. It feels like this is a name that came up, has stayed up, it hasn't gone away, and then it feels like, okay, we need to watch the Pittsburgh game, their bowl game, and then after that, we'll see what happens. But other than his name, has been very quiet on the wide receiver front.
Yeah, and the thing about Brennan that becomes really intriguing if you're Texas, it kind of becomes the potential ripple effect if you're able to get a guy like Brennan Marion, because you obviously get a guy who is an up and coming coach who's really respected within the industry. We'll see what he can do from a recruiting standpoint, and I think Jason and I talked earlier this week of Texas ties and how that'll work or will not work. But you kind of get the feeling that young, energetic, surrounded by a group of coaches who are pretty good recruiters, he'll be fine. He'll fit right in and probably won't be any kind of problems or any issues. He's also a guy that when you look, obviously you guys, Ketch and Jason, followed it so closely. When you look at all the receivers that Texas kind of missed out on in the 2022 class, whether there's guys who were committed that did not come and decommitted, or whether there's guys they were interested in that, they need some new juice. They need a new life. And he's the guy that could potentially do that. The also interesting part with him is the, now dare to dream big. He's got a guy on the roster by the name of Jordan Addison who absolutely loves him, respects him, Biletnikoff Award winner this past year. He's at Pittsburgh. His quarterback is not going to be back next year. He's a guy that has, one-time transfer rule. Could he decide if Brennan goes that he's going to come to Texas and follow the guy that he looks up to the most and come here? That's like the, oh my goodness, could that happen, right? And if that happens, that answers the Alex thing of like, hey, getting another receiver. If you put, again, this is all super hypothetical, right? Then you put Xavier on one side and Jordan Addison on another side with Bijan Robinson in the backfield and potentially Quinn Ewers as your starting QB.
Whittington in the slot.
Yes. I mean, Whittington in the slot. I mean, holy crap. I mean, you're talking about fireworks, at that point. So, that's one of those things that I think there's some smoke there, Ketch, from things I'm hearing. There seems to be some smoke there. We'll see how it goes, but he's definitely a guy that, I've heard nothing that says stop looking at him. So
exactly.
So, usually what happens in these instances in coaching search stuff, when it's wrong, usually someone's willing to, shut that down real quick, right? Because if you're Brennan and you're trying to recruit at Pittsburgh, like the last thing you want is people thinking you're going to leave. Like you find ways to shut that down. You find your people to shut it down. The fact that it hasn't been shut down, that's kind of like your context clues that says, all right, there might be something to this.
Gary Patterson, before we go into parting shots and kind of wrap things up, in a Modcast, weirdly, an hour has flown by almost, and I feel like we could go for another hour. It's funny how this happens. We haven't mentioned Gary Patterson's name. Jason, that situation just feels like it's taking longer than I would have guessed. I don't know if that is a matter of him just continuing to – I guess there's no rush. I mean, most schools are getting ready for bowl games except for Texas and Texas A&M. And by the way, I threw that little line in there, but what a weird situation. I think I mentioned it because someone keeps asking if Texas is going to replace Texas A&M in the bowl game in the chat. And it's like, is that really what you want?
I don't.
Really? Yeah. Is that it? Because the starting quarterback's in the portal right now. So I guess Hudson Card would be starting that game. But the Gary Patterson thing, thoughts on how long it's taking? We know that he's talked with the coaches. They seem to have been trying to work out how the chain of command would work. You know what I mean? Like they're beyond saying hello to each other. They're deeper than that, but yet we still haven't had any resolution to when we first report on that 3 weeks ago.
It's been a while.
Yeah, probably. It's been a few weeks at least.
Yeah.
And even after we first reported, things kind of went quiet for a couple weeks. And then I was told last week, I think maybe Tuesday or Wednesday, that he was supposed to come down and meet with the defensive staff and Sark. And that meeting didn't happen. Then we were told, they wanted to push it back past when recruiting was over. Well, that ended on Friday, basically. So here we are a week later, and not much new to be said. I mean, I don't think it's Gary Patterson posturing for more titles or more money. I don't know what the holdup is, to be honest with you. You'd think this would be something that they could get resolved pretty quickly, but at the same time, like you said, there's no huge rush, man. We're in a dead period. Depending on in what capacity Gary Patterson comes in, he's not going to be a big recruiting presence anyways, unless they make him an actual on-the-field coach. So I don't have a great answer for that, to be honest with you. I mean, I need to kind of kick the tires. Maybe it's just everybody's been focused on recruiting and now holidays. And I mean, who the hell knows? I don't know what these coaches are doing from day to day, but I know last Friday, was it Thursday, I think, when I had heard, hey, he's going to come to Austin that day. And then best I can tell, things changed that night. Wednesday night, Anwar and I heard maybe they pushed things back. Well, Thursday, I heard he's on the golf course, and I haven't heard much since then. So I don't get the impression Gary Patterson's losing any sleep over this thing, but I don't have an answer as to what potentially is dragging this thing out. I'm just not sure.
Well, the thing
if it's going to happen, I guess.
The tea leaves I was able to kind of read a little bit, Jason, is one, it's not like Sarkisian and Patterson are boys that they've known each other for years. Like, this is still kind of a brand new relationship. The person who's most familiar with Gary Patterson is Chris Delcani. But outside of Chris, having that relationship, and of course, the Lost Odds has that relationship. There's not really that relationship that currently exists. There's respect, but there's not a previous relationship. So that has one thing, I think, to do if it is from them sitting down, seems like they're going to be on the same page. Like, that's one thing I've kind of, heard about it. It is a non-coaching role. So because it is a non-coaching role, there isn't a huge, like, you've got to get this done right now for the sake of recruiting. That's something that they can push off for, a little bit of time, because, they really don't get anything kind of cranked up until January or so. So there's no real rush there. And I had another point that I totally forgot. So if I remember it, I'll come back to it.
It'll be your parting shot.
Yeah. Oh, the other thing was, there's the other thing that I think the other thing I've heard is that Patterson is still kind of holding out a little bit of hope that he can coach again. And so whether it be, as a head coach, coordinator, potentially, I've heard he wouldn't be opposed to being a coordinator. So, it looks like to me, like the thing with Texas is almost kind of like, well, he would like to come, but he's also interested in other things. I think Patterson's just keeping his options open.
Maybe waiting for the bowl season or something. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I think what we, everyone from a Texas side has to do is kind of pump the brakes and not just think, oh my goodness, well, there's an opening at Texas. Surely Gary Patterson would want this. Like, I don't understand why he wouldn't. Well, he's, Gary Patterson's kind of established himself. And he's going to take his time. So that's why I think we just haven't heard a lot on the Patterson thing. It's going to be his call on his time. It's not like for him, he's like, oh my God, this is the opportunity we've been waiting for a lifetime.
Yeah.
If it was like that, then sure. But that's not the situation.
Well, and weirdly, not weirdly, but typically the national championship game weekend is a big coaches convention type of deal at the site of the national championship game. And there's a lot of rubbing elbows and just, it turns into who's who in college football shows up and they all talk to each other. And they're all, usually if you want a coordinator or you're trying to vet something after the bowl games, we always think the first couple of days after the bowl games ends is when you start to see a lot of movement. Wouldn't be surprised if we see that, if Texas goes after the Brennan Marion guy from Pittsburgh, probably in that timeline, right? A couple of days, bowl games end, and then we start to see some of this stuff materialize. It may be quiet for the next week and a half, both on the wide receiving coaching front. It could be quiet on the Patterson front. I think Texas fans want change right away. And I get it. We're talking about it right now. Texas is kind of working on a clock, though, that doesn't mesh with the rest of college football, because the majority of the schools that matter in college football are playing their bowl games right now. So everybody's just working on a different clock, and probably Texas fans asking the questions and Texas media guys like us having this conversation just need to probably just remember it's Christmas time. Like, there are things going on that other schools and priorities that people are trying to work through and finish their season. A guy like Brennan Marion, Pittsburgh just had one of the best seasons in the history of its program in the last 20, 25 years. For them, that bowl game is a big bowl game. They probably want to get through that, deal with the things they've got to deal with, and then move on from there.
Hey, Ketch, real quick, the AFCA Coaches Convention, I looked at this morning randomly. It's January 9th through the 11th. You have guest speakers like Dave Aranda, Brett Bielema, Ryan Day, Pat Fitzgerald, and Gary Patterson.
There you go.
So you may be onto something there. Man.
There you go. And
Joey McGuire will be there.
And a guy like Patterson has been around for so long that's traditional, right? It's like
it's in San Antonio, and Jeff Traylor, Dabo Swinney will be there. So but all the coaches go down there and, like you said, rub elbows and probably see who's available and who's not. So yeah.
Well, let's go into parting shots unless anybody has anything else. Alex, we haven't come to you in a while, so you can go first.
Okay. Well, Merry Christmas to everybody, man. Happy holidays. Hope everybody has a good one. I'll be, if you're not members at Orangebloods, man, go sign up for a membership at Orangebloods. I'll have, I guess, tomorrow around 1:30 or so, after I get some Christmas stuff done, I'll have a chat over Christmas Eve chat for a couple hours. So any questions anybody has, you'd be able to throw them at me for a couple hours, and we'll have a Christmas Eve chat. Other than that, just we have NFL Week 16 starting, and my little fantasy football team that could, man, the Murderers managed to make it into the semifinals. Playing against Ketch,
matchup.
Playing against Ketchum, and I'm basically going to concede defeat just before the Thursday night games even start. When I look at Ketch's roster and look at all the questionable players that I have and everything else, it's pretty much it's going to be talk. I think the Murderers are going to be the one that ends up getting murdered here. And even if I get past Ketch, golly, there's another guy that's just steamrolled the rest of our league, Bill. So it's like, even if I get past Ketch somehow, which on the 1% chance that I do, boy, Bill is just going to absolutely have his way with the Murderers. So yeah, it's going to be a tough weekend here for me coming up. Even though it's Christmas, I'm pretty sure that Ketch is going to put a lump of coal in my stocking, and Sexual Chocolate will move on to another championship bout versus Bill. So with that, I'll hand it over to the rest of you guys.
Yeah, I don't feel
if Bill wins, y'all will never hear the end of it, man. So
well, because we treat Bill like our little bitch. We constantly badmouth him and talk about how he never wins anything. Yeah. This year, his team is legitimately the best in the league by a couple of 100 points during the season. And so that means he will lose this weekend to Nostradamus, the defending champion.
He won last year.
What's that?
He won last year too?
Bill didn't, no.
Oh.
But he plays the defending champion.
I see. Okay.
And I think we're all a little fearful of Nostradamus. We didn't want him to make the playoffs because, screw him for coming into the league and being really good. But, Alex, I've got no Chris Godwin. So the dynamics of my
does that team need Chris Godwin? I'm preparing to be murdered.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. I'll do my parting shot. I don't want to hear your Chris Godwin crybaby shit. I squeaked in. Our finals are this week, and I squeaked in, beat former Orangeblooder Jason Howell by like 1.5 last week. You heard me complain. I had two of my defensive players literally ejected from their games. Like, what are the odds of that, man?
But you won.
I know. So I made it. Yeah, but I won.
Quit complaining.
Well, here's my complaint. I've got Austin Eckler out, Leonard Fournette out, Christian McCaffrey, of course, out, Robert Woods out, my top 2 tight ends out. I'm having to pick up a running back off of waivers just to field a roster for my championship game. Adam Thielen, maybe going to play, not sure. Jalen Waddle was out last week with COVID. I don't want to hear your Chris Godwin complaint, dude. I am like literally having to put Band-Aids and duct tape on my team to keep it together. I had what Bill had. I had the best, deepest team by far, maybe in the history of our league. And now I'm going to play a roster that's nowhere near like what I played all of last year. But I'll take my chances, man. I've made it to the final, so I'll take my chances. We'll see.
Anwar didn't want to hear any of it because he missed the playoffs on the shittiest tiebreaker ever.
and I made the mistake of like looking at like the amount of points I would have scored this week because Alex got that final spot, and I totally would have won in the in the quarters. With a good chance of winning out. So it's definitely a sore subject. I'm not looking at anything fantasy related for the rest of the year.
You'll look this weekend. You'll look this weekend.
You're right.
He's gonna set his line up and see how many.
You're just like me, Anwar, because I'd be doing the same thing. Like, damn it, I would have won if I would have got that last.
Yeah. So I mean, good. I kind of want to say good luck to them, but I kind of don't really give a damn about either one of them, to be quite honest with you. So.
I don't need luck because Alex is going to beat me. So
I'm just surprised you didn't mention anything about the reverse jinx that Alex was attempting. Like,
good Lord willing, I can keep it close because I'm fearful that it'll be Sunday at 3:00, and then I'll be 80 points down, and I'll do that thing where I have hope. But I don't have hope today. I don't. I know how this thing ends. It's been a long struggle for Sexual Chocolate. Bad things happen to Sexual Chocolate these days in the playoffs. I get brutally beaten by inferior teams. And Alex has got a really good team. Like, I'm just hoping to hang in there. Anybody got a parting shot?
Yeah, I just would like to come back and say the Cat. There's absolutely no way that I'm going to be able to take this thing down against.
You two are like Lou Holtz on steroids, man. Neither one of you thinks you have a chance to win.
They're just trying to reverse jinx each other. So like my parting shot is as these guys go on. By the way, Ketch, so my gift to myself. You told me what yours was. This is my gift to myself for Christmas. This big old wireless Bluetooth speaker. It actually lights up and stuff. So it actually has like a live mode. So when the music is being played, like there's the lights that light in here. I would actually play something, but then someone would say, give us a copyright claim, which we seem to get like once a month from somebody. These little bitches out there that complain about it.
Crazy everything. How that happens. If Anwar played just right now 5 seconds of like All I Want for Christmas Is You, a Mariah Carey rep would file a copyright claim against us and YouTube would get mad. It's so weird.
Literally, we had Serenity and Jake Majors go to a pizza place and they had music playing on the speakers and there was a copyright claim that was, put against us. So for Christmas, I wish that these people who think like, oh my God, the $5 that another video might make, don't hold on to your little precious $5. By the way, so did my couple of things, Alice, I'm so surprised that you didn't ask more people for like rights to get on their property for as a Christmas gift. Like I was really waiting for that, to be quite honest with you.
I can't. Well, I mean, general whitetail season's about to end. It'll start back up again starting in like September of next year.
Okay. So anyway, yes, this is I can't see Stangman 1969. This thing is massive. Like if you want to, I will definitely love how you do that. So hey, look, I'm gonna have a good Christmas. I'm not gonna be around much. I'm just gonna let you guys know. My mom is flown in from Florida. She just kind of went into retirement at the young age of 72. So she got here yesterday. She's hanging out with the boys in the living room right now. So I'll need to go check and make sure that Titan hasn't tied her up or done something else, crazy with them. But, so we got that there. My first ex is going to be coming by for the next couple of nights and spending some time with us. She's cooking, and we're all going out to the Trail of Lights on tonight, actually. So, by the way, if you got exes, and I have plenty of them, and I'm good friends with them, man, put that stuff aside for the holidays. Put it aside for the kids, man. That's all that matters. Like, you guys ain't together anymore. Why are you still mad? Why are you still bitter? I don't understand that stuff. Like, you guys decided to part ways, and you still mad for all that? Why don't you just stay together? Guys, just stay together and be miserable. You guys aren't together. That should make you happy. You guys should be happy to see each other. Be like, damn, so happy I don't have to come home and see your ass every single day. How are you been? Like, that's how it should be. So I'm gonna have a great time with the son's mother, who's gonna be here for a couple of days. So you guys enjoy your holiday. I'm definitely going to enjoy mine to make it memorable. Do some stuff with the boys, take some family photos, all that. So happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa. Happy Hanukkah. And if you don't like any of the holidays, hope you have a good Saturday and enjoy yourself.
Anwar Working Man says, Freaky Deaky says hi. I don't know if that's for any of us in particular or if Freaky Deaky is just telling us all hello at the end. But what up, Freaky
Deaky? This sounds like that's coded for some.
It does. I wonder if that's like an X in here somewhere, like just trying to throw us off our game.
I hope not. Working Man.
Okay.
Hey,
I got something they want to tell us. Yeah.
I will take the final parting shot and just on behalf of all of us, wish everybody both watching this live and later on the YouTube channel and all of the various platforms. You guys have a wonderful Christmas. Like Anwar said, get rid of the bad juju and the bad vibes. And we're here. And it's been 2 years of pandemics and all kinds of stuff going on. Love your loved ones. Play with your kids. Make the best of the rest of this week. And on behalf of myself and Alex, Jason, Anwar, the entire Orangebloods.com crew, you guys have a Merry Christmas, a wonderful holidays. May all of your best visions for what the next couple of days can look like come true. Here's to Alex getting that barbecue that he wants to have from Interstellar. Like, here's hoping the lines tomorrow aren't very long. And you guys treat each other well. We'll see you guys sometime next week. You guys be good to each other. Later.